It all just comes from the fact that feeling like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's like one of the best feelings in the world to me, and it clearly is for others too, because there is this drive. I mean, there was something to Rousseau's idea of self-directed learning, because after a while, once the reality of like human frailty and subjectivity, the finitude of the human experience becomes like really apparent, the need to secure oneself against that also increases. The problem, though, for the education of children, though, is that for a lot of kids, that sense of anxiety and uh, discomfort, it doesn't come for a long time, and so it'll be a while before you get kind of brought back to learning. Uh, there has to be somebody to direct it, to direct the flow of energy, uh, because you can't rely only on the most neurotic freaks to like pay attention, which is essentially what we have now. Like we think it's intellect, and like the right wing likes to think that they are doing race and IQ shit, and what they're and that IQ measures intelligence. IQ measures neuroses. IQ measures your delusional relationship um, to figures of authority in your life. Because yes, IQ does show how good you'll do on tests. It actually does. This is the thing people say IQ doesn't judge anything. It really will. You look at IQ tests, they do show you how well people will perform at taking tests. It does that. And you might say, well, that doesn't mean anything. In a meritocracy where results get you into jobs and stuff and into educational opportunities, it absolutely does, because native intelligence has to, at a certain point, be shaped by experience with the world. It has to be directed in ways. Energy has to be like positively linked to, like effort has to be linked to a positive response. Like I'm learning more and making more sense of the world by doing this. I'm getting more accolades from other people by doing this. I'm increasing the chances that I can have a stimulating and rewarding job for doing this. It puts all this energy in these directions, but it's based on a neurotic relationship to these authority figures, not an eternal ability of the mind. And so when people say we need to like we need okay, we are in crisis. The earth can no longer support the number of people who are on it. How do we choose who will survive? Well, we got this list of the most neurotic freaks on earth. The most power fixated weirdos in the world, even though we built up this insane technical capacity that could be directed towards a sustainable existence for billions of people on this planet. We have to destroy everything because we are, all of us, gripped by a middle class, neurotic, authoritarian, sadomasochistic identity that is wrapped around achievement and all these concepts. And it does a great job of powering a machine, and it did a great job of piling up a bunch of wealth, but it can no longer, the same way that every previous regime of power that's ever been built, it can no longer sustain itself in a crisis of its own creation. Every single regime of authority that has ever existed, no matter what its ideological and spiritual foundations were, collapses once the environment around it changes, and it cannot change its own internal structure and remove its own hierarchies, which it needs to do to be more efficient in its distribution of energy. So yes, this meritocracy, the IQ meritocracy, built the world, and now it is destroying it. And these people's answer is, let's destroy everything and rebuild just with the crazy people, just with the most neurotic freaks, just with the most stamped with the authoritarian boot of all humans, because they took their intelligence, which, yes, there is a relationship between being crazy and being intelligent in other ways, being perceptive, I would say, in other ways, because that insanity emerges from the unresolvable contradiction between being and non-being. I am alive, but will not be. That cannot be processed by a conscious mind. If you are aware of it, and certain brains become aware of it early, it drives you insane. What IQ does is measures the kids who, when driven insane by that idea, get strapped into a fucking hamster cage, get strapped to a get put into a rat maze, get put into a Skinner box, where achievement and in abstract thought, in certain forms of abstract thought, are rewarded materially, spiritually, intellectually. All the things that make you up get rewarded by it, and then zoom, you're good. But eventually, you get to a point where everybody in charge now is addicted to forms of validation that can only exist under the system that can no longer exist. But again, we're not even saying, oh, yes, but smart people are neurotic. No, no, no. Smart people in a situation where structures exist to catch that neuroses and channel it positively. Oh, hey, you can do X, Y, and Z. Well, here's a gold star. Here's a trip to the science fair. Here's X, Y, and Z. Here's a prospective college career. If you have those latter, you can bank that energy. If you don't, you will lose it. It will be diffused. It'll be burned up by feudal individual rebellion. So this is the funniest thing to me about the new intellectual right guys, is that they think they want to revert to the pre-capitalist forms of nobility. They want a new noble caste. And they want to have that noble caste emerge out of a bunch of fucking scribes, a bunch of eunuchs, a bunch of people who learned the opposite of all the lessons that a warrior would learn during the same period that they learned to assert themselves in the world. Not by sitting in a fucking room, not by looking at a bunch of little symbols, but by running and jumping and riding on a fucking horse and wielding a fucking sword and risking one's life and winning victory. That like uncluttered, unneurotic mind, the savage simplicity of a steppe barbarian. It has been bred out of everyone, including, and not just including, especially and most of all these motherfuckers. In fact, the people they want to exterminate are the only people who are holding any of those values alive, because they're the only ones who might have to fucking fight for their lives when they're kids. They want to delude themselves into thinking that market competition is the same thing, but it is not. It is a qualitatively different experience that creates qualitatively different human subjectivity. If it doesn't, then there is no change through history. Because you can say all day there's never an abrupt break, but what there is there is a process that has fulcrums, that has inflection points, and has punctuated equilibriums. And I know punctuated equilibrium has been disproven, the Stephen Jay Gould thing, but if you're looking at the level of culture and consciousness, you have one mindset that is always changing, but is stabilized around certain ideas and certain values. You have disruption that accelerates the change. And remember, it's always being fueled by class conflict beyond anything. Even if everything else is stable, class conflict continues over time. Everybody gets older and dies. So entropy in the system is continuous regardless of the stability of the relationship to the environment. And then there is a acceleration of change, and then inflection point, explosion of difference, violently, an explosion of energy, vast, usually resolves in mass numbers of dead. And then at the other end of it, new people with new understandings of the world that reverse the polarities and change the way we understand things. And the instinctive servility to ideas, to abstract symbols that the IQ class has cannot create a culture. It's sterile by itself. As part of a dynamic with others, it can build something. But as the lone locus point of a totally technologicized, dehumanized world, it's no more productive than AI is.